How is everybody doing tonight? Is everybody doing good? Nod your head if you're doing pretty good. Give me a thumbs up if you're doing good. Okay, I'm glad like two of you are doing good. Jack, give me sorry, he like slammed his finger in the door. It's awesome. Anyway, I'm super glad to be here tonight, as I'm always glad because Sunday nights are the best nights of the week. I love being around you guys. I love being here. I love coming together as a family. I love looking at the Word of God. I love worship. Y'all did an amazing job with worship. Thank you all for everything you do for this youth group, and thank you for being here tonight. I've got a message that I'm going to share with you that I've called Call It. Call It. Call It. Yeah, everybody likes to call it. You know, if you go to see a movie, you all want to be the one that knows how it's going to end. You want to be the one that calls it. Or you want to know what's going to happen. You want to be the one to identify what's going to happen. I love going to movies, but I love scary movies a lot. The beauty about scary movies is that they're I don't know if it's good or bad, but I kind of like knowing that the movie's predictable. I like knowing how a movie's going to end. I know some of you aren't like that. I hate sad movies. Do any of you, are you with me? Okay, good. I hate sad movies. I don't understand why anybody in their right mind would want to go to a movie and then leave the movie feeling horrible about their lives. Like, that just doesn't click inside my head. Like, why do people want to go to a movie that's going to make you sad and it's going to make you feel bad about yourselves? I don't get it. I want to go to a feel-good movie, a movie that it's got a good ending, it's got some action, maybe a horror movie where everyone dies and you're like, well, that's a sad ending. No, it's usually a good ending, but I don't know. It just depends on the movie. But I love having that predictability in the movie. I love knowing what's going to happen. I love, there's the new It movie is coming out. How many of you? Yeah? So it comes out, like September 6th. If you saw the first one, you probably agree that it was amazing. And I know the second one is amazing too. It hasn't come out yet, but reviews are coming out, and you're seeing the trailers, and John McAvoy's in it, and you know that James McAvoy, right? I don't know. I said John. James McAvoy. You know if he's in it, it's good, right? And you can have this expectation, like, I don't even have to go see it yet. I will go see it, but I can already tell you it's good. I already know that this movie is going to be good. Romans 4:17 says, God who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did. And today I'm going to talk to you about call it. Call what you want to happen. Call life. Call the shots. Decide how things are going to turn out. Decide that you know how things are going to be. I love this verse because it says that God, he calls things which do not exist as though they did. In other words, he sees something that's not there and he calls it into existence. And I want all of you to leave here with the mindset tonight that you can decide how your future is going to play out. You can decide how things are going to go for your life. You can make the changes in your life that you want to make. You can predict how things are going to turn out for you, and it all starts with the things that you say. You can speak things into existence. You can call things that do not currently exist as though they do exist. I haven't seen the It movie, but I know it's going to be good. I have a confident expectation, and I can already talk about it like it's going to be good because I know how this thing's going to play out. And whatever your battle is here tonight, whatever things you're up against, you can have a positive expectation about how they're going to end. You can start speaking things that aren't happening right now as though they are happening, because the truth is your words are going to cause things to set in motion. Your words are going to change the outcome of the situation that you're in. Your faith, the things that you say, we release our faith by the words that we say. Our words are an expression of our faith. And your faith, it's the key in life that opens up every door of opportunity. It opens up the promises of God. And you can go through life having a confident expectation of how life is going to play out. And so I'm going to tell you to call it tonight. Call what you want. Call what you want to see in your life. Call it how you want it, because that's going to be the outcome that you decide it's going to be. We're going to talk about the story of Jericho. And maybe you've heard of Jericho. A lot of people probably have heard the story, or maybe grown up and if you went to children's church, you probably learned about the Battle of Jericho. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. I had to learn that on the piano when I took piano. It's a pretty common thing. We're going to talk about the story. And to give you a little bit of background, God's people, the Israelites, most of you know the story where God freed them from Egypt, from slavery in Egypt. He brought them out. They parted the Red Sea. They escaped from Egypt. If you don't know that story, go read it. It's a really powerful story. But God takes them out of slavery. He takes his nation, the nation of Israel. He takes them out of slavery, and he leads them through the wilderness, and it takes a really long time. But finally, he starts to bring them in to the land that he's promised them, to the inheritance that he has for them. And so they're finally getting ready to go into the promised land. They're finally getting ready to take the land that's rightfully theirs. And so they cross the Jordan River, and they arrive at the first city that they're going to take, and it's the city of Jericho. Okay, the city doesn't currently belong to them. It's possessed by a people that aren't God's people, but God has promised this city to them, and so they're going to take it. And they get to the city, and it's a fortified city. It's got a big wall on it. It's got thousands of people living inside of it. And they get to the city, and it's complete. Like, everyone runs inside. Everyone hides. They lock the doors. They shut the wall down. Nobody's coming in. Nobody's coming out. And they're standing outside the wall. They're ready to take the city. And so God speaks to them, and we're going to go through the story in a second. God speaks to them and says, hey, this city's yours. This is what you need to do to get it. You need to walk around. You need to march. You need to cheer. And long story short, what they do is they go walk around this city for 7 days. And at the end of the seventh day, they give a big shout. They blow their horns, and they all start cheering. And the walls literally just fall down. All right, and we're gonna talk about this some more. It's a really cool story, really powerful story, but God gives them the city. And there's so much in this story that we're going to look at about calling it, about bringing things into existence by the things that you say, about celebrating the victory before you see it, and just putting your faith in God, because your faith is the substance. Your faith is the answer. The moment that you believe God, it's as good as done for you. The moment that your faith is the reality that we live in. And so we're going to go through it, and we're going to look at this story, but it's a true story. We a lot of times read the Bible like it's fiction, like it's just an allegory. It's something that people wrote to represent a biblical truth or something. But no, the truth is every story in the Bible is real, and it was written for you. It was written so that you can learn from it, so you can understand why we believe what we believe. They got to the city of Jericho, and scholars believe that the wall was between 30 and 40 feet high, which is a pretty big wall. You're not climbing over that thing. They're going to be shooting you with arrows. I don't know, but you're not climbing that. They believe that this happened somewhere around, I saw dates as late and as early as 1400 BC, 1400 years before Christ came. But the cool thing about it is they've actually done archaeological digs around this area, around the city that Jericho was. And they've actually found so much evidence to back up the story that you see in Joshua chapter 6. They have found remains of a wall that was collapsed, and they've actually deduced that the way it collapsed, it looks like an earthquake hit the wall. And that just makes the story even more powerful to me, because when I read it and I read about the walls, you hear the walls come tumbling down. No, this was a violent, it fell down flat. And they dug it out, and they did the dig, and I actually read that the way that the wall fell down formed a perfect ramp from the outside. How cool is that? And so the way that the Israelites got over this wall is it basically just fell down, it formed a ramp, they walked over it, and they went and they took the city. And not only that, but we'll read it, but they had to burn the city afterward, and there's plenty of evidence of the city was burnt to the ground. It just everything, and it happened around the same time period. Everything just corresponds really well. It's so cool how science and history and the Bible, they can all go hand in hand. But this is a real event that happened. So we're going to be reading it from Joshua chapter 6, and we're going to start walking through in verse 1. It says, "Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in, but the Lord spoke to Joshua. The Lord said to Joshua, 'I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors.' Now that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Because they haven't taken the city yet. The city, it's fortified. There's a lot of soldiers in that city that they're going to have to fight. There's a lot that they're going to have to do to take that city. And it doesn't look really reasonable to think that the city is theirs. But God is already saying, hey, I've already given you the city. In other words, he's saying, you don't need to worry about what it actually looks like. You don't need to worry about the condition. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen to make this happen. No, all you got to realize is that this is already yours. I've already decided that the city is yours, and therefore it's yours. So he told Joshua, look, I've already given you this city. He said, you and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times, with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast on the ram's horn, have all the people shout as loud as they can. Then the walls of the town will collapse, and the people can charge straight into the town. This is a crazy story. Like, imagine you're this army, and all you've got to go on is the word of God. In the physical, in the world that they were living, it didn't look like they had this city, but they had to make a decision right there. Were they going to believe God, or were they going to believe what the situation looked like? God invited them to see the things that he saw. And the way that we see the things that God has for us is through faith. And so you've got to choose, are you going to believe the situation that you see, or are you going to believe what God has promised? And so the story keeps going where Joshua gave the orders to his men to march. And they marched around once every day. The entire city once every day. And then the 7th day, they marched around it 7 times. But they didn't question this. They didn't say, well, God, how does this work? Like, it's a fortified city. We're just going to go walk around the city with soldiers in it with a 30 to 40 foot wall, and we're just going to cheer and shout. Like, how does that even make sense? I can imagine how dumb that must have looked, but nobody questioned God. They just listened to what God said, and they started acting in faith. And then in verse 10, when Joshua was commanding his people to do this, he actually said this. He said, do not shout. First, do not even talk, Joshua commanded. Not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout. Then shout. This is actually something that stood out to me a lot, because the Israelites, God's people, they had a bad habit of complaining and arguing against God. And the reason it took them so long to get to the promised land is because they had a mouth on them. Like, they could not just wrap their heads around, just listen and obey and trust God. Like, that's all you got to do. And so because of that, they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. But Joshua had learned a lesson. He said, hey, if you guys are going to talk, I know there's a pretty good chance that you're going to say something that's going to get us in trouble, that you're going to mess up this whole thing, and we can't allow any shred of doubt to come out of your mouth. So he told this man, he said, don't even talk. I don't want to hear anything from you. I think it's our human nature. Like, we have a habit, or maybe it's just me. I don't think it's just me, but we have a habit of messing things up with our words, right? Like, how many of you have ever messed up something really good by the things that you've said? Like a friendship, something. We all do that. Like, that's our human nature. Like, we find something good and we like crap all over it with our words. Like, that's what we do. That's what's in us. That's in our nature. Growing up, I was a extremely stubborn child, and I got lots of spankings. Like, it was a pretty frequent thing when I was a kid growing up. And I just had a habit of just always making it worse, because I wanted to be the one with the final word. I wanted to prove that, like, I was smarter, that I was, like all of that you've probably experienced at one point in your life. And so I know, like, when my mom would spank me, I'd make a point to start laughing or doing something to, like, show her that, like, you don't gotta. And what would happen? I'd just get beat harder. And I would always, I would either make a joke or I would do something after I got a spanking, and it would just make my parents mad. And I'd always end up losing. And it never worked out for me. Like, we have this human tendency, we always want the last word. We always want the last say. We want to be able to control the circumstance. We want to be able to influence the outcome. But you've got to make a decision. When you're marching to the victory that God has for you, you've got to decide not to let doubt come out of your mouth, because your words have the power to either make or break your situation. Your words can get you where you want to go, or they can keep you where you don't want to be. All right, that's what your words are, that's what they're going to do. Proverbs 18:21, it says that the tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. All right, if you're in here, how many of you love to talk? All right, that's okay. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Just remember, you're going to reap the consequences. And so when you decide to talk, you've got to decide, are you going to talk death or are you going to talk life? Because if you talk life, you're going to reap the consequences of life. And that will be a good thing for your life. But if you're going to talk death, then that's what you're going to see in your life. That's where your life's going to head. But if you decide to look ahead, you decide to look at that wall, you decide to look at that battle or the thing that God's bringing you into, and you decide to speak life over that situation. You decide to say, the battle is mine. This victory is mine. I am healed. It's by Jesus' stripes that I am healed. Or, I'm fully believing for restoration for my family. If you decide to speak life, then that's what you're going to see in your life. You've got to learn to control the things you say. You can't let negativity come out of your life, because if you just speak negativity all the time, your life is going to be a reflection of that. That's what people are going to see in you. That's what you're going to see in yourself. That's how your life is going to start responding to the words that you speak. You've got to choose to speak life. You've got to choose to speak words of faith. You've got to choose to speak words that are going to build and uplift everybody that you come in contact with. So Joshua, he said, I'm not going to even let my men speak, because I can't trust them not to say something that's going to get us into trouble. And in verse 15, it says, on the seventh day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town as they had done before. But this time they went around 7 times. The 7th time around, as the priests sounded the long blasts on their horns, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the town. Okay, so remember, they're still looking at a fortified city. Not one stone on this wall has moved. Nothing has fallen down. There hasn't been any shred of evidence that they have the victory other than God saying, I've given you the city. But Joshua is choosing to speak the words that God has spoken. He's choosing to say, look, the Lord has given us this town. This is our city. He didn't say it's going to be our city. He didn't say once we finish shouting and finish cheering, then it will be our city. No, he believed that was his city. He believed that God had already given it to him. And he didn't speak words of doubt. He spoke that thing into existence. He decided that he was going to speak words that lined up with what God had said about the situation. Joshua saw the victory before he ever really saw the victory, because he saw it through faith. There's a story about Walt Disney. How many of you like Disney? How many of you have been to like Disney World or Disneyland? Pretty cool. They just opened a Star Wars part in Disney World? I don't know. But Disney it's pretty cool. They basically own entertainment now. They own Star Wars, they own Marvel, they own all Spider-Man. Not anymore. RIP Tom Holland. No more Marvel Tom Holland. That stinks. Did y'all hear about that? They're not going to be able to make any more Spider-Man movies because they didn't reach a deal. Disney didn't reach a deal with Sony, and so they can't use Spider-Man anymore. So, yeah, RIP Tom Holland. Sorry, I thought everyone knew that. I'm sorry to drop that bombshell on you. I know it hurts, right? Anyway, Disney. So there's this story about Walt Disney. You may have heard of Walt Disney. He's the guy who created Disney. He had an imagination like no other, and he changed the way that we view entertainment. And he did such amazing things for the entertainment industry. And there's a story that goes, I believe Walt Disney died in somewhere around the 60s. Does that sound right? But there's a story that goes that in the summer of 1974, Disneyland in Anaheim, California had been in operation for almost 20 years. Disney was a 47-year-old man, already a successful film producer, director, animator, and entrepreneur when he began to work on the ideas of Magic Kingdom. He had a dream of having a magical park where families could go with their children to have clean fun. Okay, so he had this vision for an amusement park, but it says that after Disney passed away, Mrs. Disney was sitting by a man named Walter Cronkite at the opening of Walt Disney World in Florida. Okay, so by this time, Walt Disney had already died, and it's his widow that's at the opening of Walt Disney World in Florida. And the man leaned over to Miss Disney and he said, "Wouldn't it be great if Walt were here to see this today?" And Mrs. Disney wisely replied, "If Walt had not first seen this, you would not be seeing it today." That's what faith in God really looks like. You have to see that the victory is already yours. You have to be able to see the victory before you ever see the victory, because if you can't see the victory through faith, you're never going to see it in the natural. You've got to decide that no, the promise of God is more real than any situation that you can ever be in. The things that he has for you are more real. You've got to decide to believe that, and you've got to decide to speak it. I love that it says to shout, for the Lord has given you the kingdom. There's a celebration in shouting. There's a victory in shouting. They were basically cheering. They were getting excited that the city was already theirs. They started praising God before they ever even saw the walls fall down. You know, when my dad bought me my first car, I didn't have to wait till I got the car. It was the moment that he bought me that car. Hadn't even given me my keys. I hadn't even gotten to drive it. But the moment he told me that I got my car, that was the moment that I celebrated. You know, it wasn't the moment that I finally got to see my car, because the moment that he told me he had given me a car, it was as good as done. He had given it to me. It was mine. And listen, the promises of God are yours right here, right now. You don't have to wait until you see it. You don't have to wait until your situation changes. All you got to do is decide to believe God right here, right now, and start speaking in faith. You can speak things into existence by the words that you speak. If you don't like the situation that you're in, then start changing the way that you speak. Start speaking in faith. Start speaking positivity. Stop speaking negativity. Stop with that woe is me attitude. Why will nothing get better for me? Why is nothing ever going to change? And start saying, you know what, God? Yeah, I know that I'm not in a good situation right now, but I believe what you have for me. I know that it's by Jesus' stripes that I am healed. I know that healing is the children's bread. I know that you have a plan and a future for me. And today I'm choosing to believe that. Listen, I know we all have these battles that we're facing. We all have these things that we come up against, but you've got to decide. Are you going to start speaking in faith? Are you going to start choosing to believe God? Or are you just going to let the world beat you down? And I know it's not always easy. I know what it feels like to be. I've had bronchitis, not recently, but like maybe a year ago. It's not fun. You're coughing a lot. You don't feel good. And I know that when I'm personally sick, like when I was dealing with that, the last thing I wanted to do was start saying, God, I thank you that I'm healed. You know, one, I didn't have the energy to. I didn't feel like it, but I knew that if I was going to get through this, if I was going to put my faith in God, I had to choose to speak in faith. And it took energy. It took sacrificing some dignity, because you almost feel like a liar sometimes when you're saying something that you don't see, but that's not what's going on. What's happening is you're seeing the reality that God sees for your life, and you're choosing to express that through your faith. It's so important that you choose to celebrate the victory before you see it. And maybe you're in a place tonight, and we're all in different places. We all have different struggles that we're going through, and it's so easy not to be able to see the end, not to be able to see the way out. And maybe you feel like you're at a dead end. Maybe you feel like you're stuck. Maybe you feel like there's no hope for you in this situation that you're in tonight. But tonight I want to tell you that there's always hope. There's always an answer. And it's so important. I want to challenge you to start speaking life in your situation, that you might not feel like it. Yeah, it might seem cheesy. It might seem too simple, and the truth is, it is too simple. That's why Jesus paid such a dear price, to make it simple for you, so that you wouldn't have to live in misery, so that you wouldn't have to live in sickness, so that you wouldn't have to live in depression, so you wouldn't have to carry any of that load around with you. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. And if you can choose to see that, if you can choose to look past what you're struggling with, if you can choose to put down the burden that you're carrying around, the guilt, the shame, and start seeing yourself how God has seen you. I'm the righteousness of God in Christ. You are the righteousness of God in Christ. You are all sons and daughters of God. I want to challenge you to start speaking things into existence this week. And whenever you come up against things, just choose to put your faith in God, and you'll start seeing the fruit of that in your life. Amen.